What's up, guys? Today we're going to make a Hangman game, and this is going to start out with a real bare bones version, but you can add to it and make it prettier and fancier and nicer once we get the core loop set up. So I'm going to start with some comments. That's kind of our to-do list. It's like, here are the things we need, and then we can bounce around and fill in whatever we want as we go. So I'm going to say, first we need to get the word. The word is not displayed to the user, it's behind the scenes. But there is a word, there's an answer key that needs to exist for anything else to happen. So we'll get the word. And then we're going to have the repeating stuff. That's like every turn you guess, you check it, you see if you win, whatever. And that's going to be some kind of loop. So let's say every turn we want to get guess from the user. And right away we want to check if it's good. Not good in the sense of in the word, but even before that we want to check to see if it's valid. Like if they type multiple letters, we want to say no, it has to be one. Or if they put in a number, we want to say that's the wrong kind of thing. That before we even move on to the next step, we want to make sure we have the right stuff. And then we get to the actual Hangman part where you check if it's in the word. And then if it is, we want to say that gets displayed. Like the user's going to see a bunch of blanks to start off with. And if they say F and there's an F in this spot, it's going to get switched out. The rest will still be blanks. But then if they do another one that's correct, like, okay, there's W, and they'll see the word slowly fill in as they go. So we want to add it to displayed word, whatever we end up calling this, the blank thing that's not the same as the one behind the scenes that we tested against. And then we want to say, well, if not, then we have to keep score. We have to say you're getting closer to dying. If it's Hangman on the whiteboard or on a piece of paper, you draw the guy with the head and arms and body, and that will not be in our first version. We can add that later, but I'm just going to keep a number that's like counting down to 0, and when you get 0, you're done. And then everything else around it can stay if we, use some modular replacement to put something else in there later to draw the guy. Now I'm going to say, if they get it wrong, you also want to do one more thing, which is keep track of the used letters. If you're writing it on the board, you have like a separate little category in the corner where you put, oh, you guessed a T, but there's no T, so you write that down to prevent wasting time if they say that again or whatever. So we're going to say, if not, add to used letter list. Maybe not necessarily a list in the Python sense. It could be something else, but you get the idea. And then we need to start thinking about, at the end of a turn, is there going to be another turn? And there might not if it's a game over. If you win or you lose, we want to stop there and make sure we don't accidentally keep looping. So we want to check for win and check for lose. Maybe in the opposite order would make more sense, but we'll see. That's definitely forgetting some things, but let's start with that and start filling in little bits of code, bouncing around, building it up. Okay, so get the word. Obviously, this could be complicated. I went to Google Python Hangman, and the first YouTube video I clicked on was somebody starting with like, okay, let's import a list of 1,000 words and have it randomly pick one. I'm going to save that for later. I'm just going to say, in order to get all the other stuff, we need something to work with. So let's just pick a word. Okay, strawberry. That allows us to guess something, test if it's in there, whatever. And then later we'll replace this with some cooler version from a word bank or from player 2 entering it when player 1 isn't looking, blah, blah, blah. Now, that is probably not the only variable we're going to need at the top to get started with, but we'll see how it goes, and we'll jump back here and add more. Getting the guess from the user, well, that's another simple one that we can say guess equals input, insert a letter, and then checking if it's valid, we'll save that for later. When we're testing, we'll just make sure we actually enter something that works, a single letter, and no punctuation or whatever. This is the hard part. This is the core main mechanic of the game, which is when they have a hidden word and a seen word like SEEN that starts out as blanks, and then those blanks change to other stuff. How are we going to do that? Well, we need to create that. So let's say, before we even mess with it, blank word equals, as I said, word is going to be different stuff, so I'm not going to say the right amount of blanks for this. I'm going to say the right amount of blanks for anything. And let's change the name of this, because if I use the word word and I'm mentioning it here, I'm not going to remember when I glance at the code, is that the keyword, the answer keyword, or is it the blank one? So let's call this keyword, meaning that the other guy is going to be a different word. So blank word is going to be enough blanks to match this. So we could do a for loop that's like for letter in blah blah blah, or we could just use times. We could say len of keyword times blank. So you can use plus with strings, like when you're adding stuff, and you can also use times. And what this does is it'll create, let's do a print just to test, print blank word, and I'm going to turn that off for a second. It will give you the amount of blanks that you need, which will be different depending on whatever this is later. Okay, so that's cool. Since we might use len of keyword a lot, we could like give that a name. Who knows? I don't know. Now let's do some of this stuff. Okay, if the guess is in keyword, we want to trigger that and add it to our blanks, but keep going because there might be more than one. Like if we said R, we'd have to do this one and then keep going and find these, not just kick us out of the loop right away. And then we'll need to do the ones for if you don't find it. So let's say for letter in keyword, we'll do some stuff. But right away I'm thinking that we need to keep the index, like we need to keep track of where we are, because if we find something in the third slot, we need to change that third slot in the blank word. And this isn't going to keep track of that. We can't say letter.find or whatever, because it'll only catch the first one. So there is a thing that does that called enumerate, but we haven't learned that yet, and I don't want to add new stuff in the middle of the project. So let's say just the classic I in range type of loop. And we're going to go like that. And so we're going to say we're looping through, but we're also keeping the number of like 0, 1, 2, like where are we in that progression so we can use it. We're going to say if keyword I, meaning one letter at a time, equals guess, meaning whatever they just put, then something happens. So like if they put S, we hit the first one, hey, it is an S. We need to do our job, which is to say the ugliest part, the worst part is going to be right here. Okay. The string, what we want to do is to say blank word at that spot turns into the letter, but that doesn't work. Lists can do that. And we could make this by changing everything to a list, but I'm not. I'm going to keep it in strings. This is not working for strings because strings are not mutable in that way. So what you have to do instead is like build it from the stuff up to the spot you want, then the spot you want, then the stuff after. And we've done that a couple times recently in Code.hs, so it might be fresh in your mind. What we're going to do is to say blank word equals blank word up to that spot plus the letter we're adding plus everything else, which is like I plus 1 to the end. And I don't know if you need parentheses, but let's do it. So this is like, oh my gosh, it's so long we have to stretch the frame here. Come on. So this is like, now blank word is whatever it was, which could be all blanks, or it could be stuff that had been filled in previous guesses, plus the new guess, plus the rest. And this is triggering multiple times. If we go through the word and we see it more than once, it'll keep doing it. If we say R and then we keep going, we catch the next one and the next one. So that's not a problem. So now we want to say, well, let's test it, because I wrote that and I think it works, but let's test it. You always want to hit run and see what happens. I never told it that we're actually looping. So let's see. I'm going to do one that's in there and say E. Well, we never told it what to do with printing it, right? So somewhere around here we want to print the dang situation and what words have you used and what's the current blank and what's the current score. So I know we could just write it right here, but we're going to need to do that every turn, no matter whether we're testing a part or testing the whole thing. So I'm going to put that at the top and say like display situation, which is like, okay, we're going to print the blank word, and then later we'll add stuff here that's like print the score, print the used letters list and all that, which we haven't even made yet. So let's say, okay, that helps. It tells us that there are this many blanks, and we're going to guess E, and that was in there, and it puts it in the spot. Let's do one that's not, and that doesn't change it, and then let's do one that is in there multiple times, and hey, that worked. Okay, so that's solid. We can build around that, knowing that it works at least, if we don't ruin it. So now we're going to say, if it's not in there, what do we do? And we're not talking about like else. We're not talking about something in here, because that would be triggering on an individual letter. We don't want to say like, oh, they guessed T. Well, this one's not T. No, we want to keep looking through the whole word in case it's in there somewhere later. So we want to make this like a separate guy, a separate block from this, I think. And we can use no for loops. We don't need to loop through it to see if it's in there. We can just say like, if guess not in keyword. Okay. So if it's not in there, then we can keep score and blah, blah, blah. But we don't need to use a for loop for this, because the in keyword is doing the job. I don't know why I'm writing it above. We can write it below. We'll see what happens. If guess not in keyword, then score, we need to keep score. But I don't want to call it score, because score implies that we're going up. And I think we're going to go down, so I'm going to call it lives. And maybe we should make it based on the length of the word. Like if it's longer, it's harder, so you get more guesses. I don't know, but I'm just going to pick a number. And we're going to go lives minus equal 1, meaning it notches down. There are some programming languages where you can just say like minus minus, and it will, that'll be a shortcut for minusing 1, but I don't think that's in Python. And we're also going to say add it to the list of bad ones, because we want to tell them, hey, you've already guessed L or whatever. So let's make that. And I'm just going to make it a string. It could be a list or other stuff, but we've been going with strings, and we'll keep that for now. So we're going to say used letters plus equal guess. And that's like keeping track of the ones we've used. So we're going to say, let's give these labels so that when it displays, it's not like, why is there a 6 there? You know, let's give it a little description. And then we'll say lives, comma lives, and then we'll say print used letters, comma, use letters. And this thing, I wouldn't be surprised if we need to use this multiple times. Like, we might spin this off into a function so that we can call it here and call it elsewhere, but we'll see how it goes. Let's see what happens if we hit run, and it tells us the situation, which is very nice. I'm going to guess an E, and then that looks ugly. We probably want to have a blank line from one turn to the next, but it is working. And let's do one that's wrong and see if it decreases our lives. There's no I, so let's guess that, and it is, so that's cool. Now, these two little blocks here could be completely independent, but, you know, if the guess is not in the keyword, we don't really need to run these lines because it's definitely not going to find anything. So we could save the computer some work by saying, okay, if this happened, we don't need this to happen. You can take a break for this nanosecond. So we could say else and then do these guys. Although that makes it stretch out farther and harder to see, so who knows. Let me hit run just to make sure I didn't ruin it. Yeah, it's fine. Okay, let's add that blank line just at the very end, and then we can rearrange it later. And there are cooler ways to print a blank line, but I don't want to be introducing 5 new things to memorize. Okay, that looks nice. Now we're going to say, we've done that. Let's get those out of here. Now we're going to say, let's do this thing, which is to guess accurately is fine, but what if they guess 2 letters instead of 1, or a question mark or something? We probably don't like that. We probably don't want them to be able. Or maybe the question mark is fine. Maybe we have a hangman with that. I don't know. But we definitely want a single thing. So let's do that. While guess, while length of guess is not 1, then ask them again. And you know what? I'm gonna add the thing where it should be a letter. Maybe we don't. Maybe later we'll have fancy versions where they can guess with an asterisk or something. But I'm gonna say is alpha, which means like it's a letter. So I want to say not this and not this. Like it has to be both in order to be progressing. So let's say a not around the whole thing, I think is reasonable. Like if it's a letter and it's exactly 1, then we're fine. But it's not the combo of those, then they have to go again. And we should tell them, because what if they don't know why they're getting infinitely asked the same thing over and over? Please enter exactly 1 letter. Now let's try that and say, okay, buddy, we're going to do some wrong ones. And it's doing it. And let's make sure the stuff still works. It didn't like ruin the loop. It is working just fine. Okay. It's keeping scores, keeping the used letters. That's great. So now let's do the win and lose stuff. Let's say like if game over, don't keep going, don't do another turn. So how do we check for, well, checking for losing is easier, so let's do that first, because we can just say if lives equals 0, right? Or you know what, you always want to expect things to go wrong. You always want to think, well, what if somehow it was 0 and it didn't catch it, or it went down by 2 and it went to -1 or something. So let's just say if live less than 1, because who knows what could happen? Who knows what could go wrong? You don't want to get it to where it's like lives equals -20 and it never caught it. So if lives is less than 1, you're dead. So print you died in the Dark Souls fashion. And the most important thing of all, break, meaning break from this, meaning we're not going to take another turn. Okay. If you win, well, we're not keeping score in that sense. We're not saying they get a point when they get a correct one, but we are taking away the blanks. So we could say if a blank is not in there, if all the blanks are gone, then you must have won. So if blank is not in blank word, then print you win and break. And now I'm seeing that like there's a lot of repetition here. I think this is missing the final answer. So like if you get it right, it's never going to show it because it only shows it at the beginning of the next turn. You know what I mean? So it's like, let's do it and just crush it and get them all right. What am I missing? So it says you win, but it never actually said strawberry because it was kicking us out before that. So we might want to say like, if you win, it displays all the situation. And if you lose, it should probably display that too, to say lives have gone to 0 rather than leaving it at 1. You know, so it might be good to spin this off into its own function and call that here and call that here and here. Or it might be nice to make one function that does this or this, because there's only one difference, which is the win versus die, right? Everything else is going to be the same. You still print the situation, you still break the loop. It could be that we want to like make these more efficient rather than doing the same stuff for both. I don't know. It works. Let's see what happens if we lose, because we haven't tested that one. So let's say get one right, just okay, here's something interesting that I didn't think of, which is that I wanted to lose quickly, so I wanted to just put 000, but we don't want it to add the same thing to the user. We want to say like once it's in the list, it's in the list. We don't need to say it again. And really we don't want to take a life away. If they accidentally guess a letter they've already guessed, we want to say, hey, we want to catch it right here the same way we caught it if they typed 2 letters, you know? So probably I want to use it now for testing because it's great to quickly die. It says you died. Okay. But I don't want to let them do that in real life. In the game, I want them to say, hey, you already guessed that one. Try again. Okay. So I could add a separate thing, or I could add it to this thing. I don't know. Let's say like, I do want to give them a separate message, I guess. So while guess in used letters, I could say print you've already guessed that letter. Now that's already a bit ugly to have this big block. It feels like it's taking up half the thing, but maybe we need it. Let's see how it goes. E is good, R is good, O is not. I'm going to try it a couple times and then try something else. And then say, okay, it wasn't adding to the list and it wasn't decreasing the lives, even though I was saying it wrong a bunch, which is good, right? That's what we wanted. So I am going to do one more thing and then end this video before it becomes an hour. But remember that you could spruce this up a lot. You could make it so that the lives are translated into the guy, like when it's 6, you're a blank gallows with nothing. When it's 5, you're a head. When it's 4, you're head and body. You know, we can add that stuff, and that could be its own little separate function. And you just send it how many lives, and then it knows what to do with that. But I'm going to save that for later. You could also do what I was saying and print the situation in multiple spots, especially here. It looks a little weird when you win and they never show the whole word. But what I'm going to do right now is make the keyword not the same every time. Okay, so I'm going to make a word bank, and I'm just going to type a couple right now. You could have a separate file with a zillion words in it, and then you look into that file and pick one, whatever. But for now, for testing purposes, let's just type strawberry, comma, another thing, comma, another thing. So I'm just picking some random words that come to my mind, and another one, what's the thing I'm touching right now? And so that is a tuple, but it could be a list or a set or other things too. We're going to pick one from it, and it's going to be random.choice word bank. And so if we change what word bank is, then this line is still fine, but we got to import random to be able to use it. And let's hit run and see if that works. Actually, what I should have done is pick words that are different lengths. So like a really short one and a really long one, just so I could see the difference right away, you know? So let's do one that's like, oh, just key. Okay, so then if we run it and we see it's super short, it seems like it's kind of the same every time. But E wasn't in there, so it's not strawberry. I was in there, so it's one of these guys. Okay, let's make sure that it still works when you win. Okay, that worked. You can't see it because of my... But there you go. Let's do... Okay, that one's super short, so that must be right. Okay. Now, when you run this in real life, if you have somebody play again and again, they're going to notice the repeats. But just for the purposes of getting a new feature in there, that's fine. I'm going to call it a day right here, and I'm going to say that you can add all kinds of stuff. This could be elif, since you'll never have both, or will you? That's something to think about. And then the printing here versus here, we might figure out a cooler way and a beautiful way to make it lined up, showing what we want every time and not repeating. But that's a good start.